Hello again from southeastern Finland in Northern Europe. I continue my series of videos on selected historical events in certain years, and now it is time for 1994. The Cold War had ended, the worldwide or largely worldwide economic recession was gradually easing. The last Russian or former Soviet troops were withdrawn from the three Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The European Union, that political, military, social, or societal and economic organization, whose predecessor was the European Economic Community or the European Common Market, was about to expand in Central Europe and especially Northern Europe. The civil war in the former Yugoslavia, especially Bosnia-Herzegovina, was still raging. Yemen had, if I remember correctly, a brief civil war, which however ended in the victory of those forces who promoted the country's continued unity. And a genocide in Eastern Africa killed many people. So let's look at the events more closely. 1994 was a common year, in other words, a 365-day year. In the Gregorian calendar, it started on Saturday. On January the 1st, 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico went into effect. The current populist United States President Donald Trump has proposed to replace it with the US-Canada-Mexico Agreement, which, however, is unlikely to pass the United States Congress before the August recess. Also in January 1994, and more specifically on January the 1st, 1994, the Zapatista Army of National Liberation began its war in Chiapas, Mexico. On January the 11th, the Irish government announced the end of a 15-year broadcasting ban on the Provisional Irish Republican Army and its political arm, Sinn Féin. On February the 9th, 1994, the Vance-Owen peace plan for Bosnia and Herzegovina was announced. On February the 12th, the 1994 Winter Olympics began in Lillehammer in Norway. In March 1994, the People's Republic of China received its first connection to the internet. On March the 15th, 1994, US troops were withdrawn from Somalia in the North Horn of Africa. On March the 23rd, 1994, the leading Mexican presidential candidate of the then ruling center-left Institutional Revolutionary Party, Mr. Luis Donaldo Colosio, was assassinated at a campaign rally in Tijuana near the US-Mexican border. On March the 27th, 1994, the television tycoon Mr. Silvio Berlusconi's right-wing coalition, or Forza Italia, won the Italian national parliamentary elections. Already the 1992 parliamentary elections had seen a massive defeat for the usually ruling centrist Christian Democrats, but then they were almost obliterated in these elections. And since then, the Christian Democratic Party or parties have been only minor factors in Italy. Basically, the system has become polarized between the populist right-wing parties, which are now represented in the government, and the center-left parties. On April the 6th, 1994, the Rwandan president, Mr. Juvenal Habyarimana, and the Burundi president, Cyprien Ntaryamira, died when a missile shot down their jet near Kigali in Rwanda. This was taken as a pretext to begin the Rwandan genocide. And on April the 7th, 1994, the Rwandan genocide began in Kigali, Rwanda. On April the 27th, 1994, South Africa held its first fully multiracial and democratic elections, marking the apartheid policy's last vestige's final end. The African National Congress's leader and former longtime prisoner, Nelson Mandela, won the elections and in May 1994 was sworn in as the first democratic South African president. On May the 1st, 1994, three-time Formula One world champion Ayrton Senna of Brazil was killed in an accident during the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola, Italy. I, for example, watched that event live, and I can still remember how his head jerked, well, either unconsciously or lifelessly to the left, jerked or sank. On May the 6th, 1994, the Channel Tunnel, which took 15,000 workers more than 7 years to complete, opened between Britain and France, enabling passengers to travel between the two countries in 35 minutes. Then on, sorry. On May the 12th, 1994, John Smith, who was the British Labour Party's leader and therefore the official opposition leader in Britain, died of a heart attack, aged 55, if I remember correctly. Yes, he had already suffered one heart attack before. He would be succeeded at the Labour Party's conference in July by the young, intelligent, and articulate Tony Blair, who would then, in May 1997, begin his 13-year career as the British Prime Minister or head of government. On June the 1st, 1994, the Republic of South Africa rejoined the Commonwealth of Nations after the first democratic election. Because of the apartheid policy, South Africa had left the then British Commonwealth in 1961. On June the 12th, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson, the divorced or separated wife of O.J. Simpson or Orenthal James Simpson, and Nicole's lover, Ronald Lyle Goldman, were murdered outside the Simpson home in Los Angeles. To this day, there is no clear consensus over whether O.J. Simpson either personally killed these two people or then ordered someone else or hired someone else to kill them. While he was acquitted later of the killings, he was held liable in a civil suit. On June the 17th, 1994, the 1994 FIFA World Cup, meaning Football World Cup, started in the United States. On June the 25th, 1994, the last Russian troops left Germany. On June the 26th, Microsoft announced it would no longer sell or support the MS-DOS operating system separately from Microsoft Windows. This had been its mainstay since 1980. On June the 28th, members of the Aum Shinrikyo, or the Highest Truth cult in Japan, executed the first sarin gas attack at Matsumoto, Japan, killing 8 and injuring 200. On July the 2nd, 1994, Colombian footballer Andres Escobar, 27, was shot dead in Medellin, Colombia, South America. His murder was commonly attributed as retaliation for the accidental own goal, meaning that he, in an effort to deflect the football from going into Colombia's goal, he accidentally scored it into Colombia's own goal in the FIFA World Cup against the United States soccer team. On July the 4th, the Rwandan Patriotic Front troops captured Kigali, a major breakthrough in the Rwandan civil war. On July the 7th, Aden was occupied by troops from North Yemen because there was a civil war in Yemen as well. On July the 8th, 1994, the North Korean autocratic communist president, Mr. Kim Il-sung, died after 48 years in power, and there is still a cult centered on him. His body has been embalmed and placed in a mausoleum, and there's a massive golden statue, if I remember correctly, of him placed outside Pyongyang. These details are from the self-memoirs of a Finnish evangelist and Bible teacher, Mr. Tapani Suonto, who is also a writer and a musician. On July the 17th, 1994, Brazil won the 1994 FIFA World Cup, defeating Italy 3-2 in a penalty shootout in the final. On August the 5th, 1994, groups of protesters spread from Havana, Cuba's Castillo de la Punta, or Point Castle, creating the first protests against the communist dictator Fidel Castro's government since 1959. On August the 31st, 1994, the Russian army left Estonia and Latvia in the Baltic region of Northern Europe, ending the last traces of Eastern Europe's Soviet occupation. On September the 3rd, 1994, Russia and the People's Republic of China agreed to de-target their nuclear weapons against each other. It's one event which I would like to In Austria, Central Europe, a referendum on the European Union membership was held, if I remember correctly, yes, on June the 12th, 1994, with the result that a clear majority of the participating voters favored joining the European Union. It is 2.3% of the voters participated, meaning of the eligible voters, and 66.6% of the valid votes were cast in favor of the agreement. So 33.4% opposed it. The two then dominant parties of Austria, the center-right Christian Democratic People's Party and the center-left Social Democratic Party, favored the membership. I'm not sure what the Green Party's position was, but the populist right-wing Austrian Freedom Party, led by Mr. Jörg Haider, opposed it. Austria would join the European Union on January the 1st, 1995. On September the 13th, 1994, US President Bill Clinton signed the federal assault weapons ban, which banned the manufacture of new firearms with certain features for a period of 10 years. On September the 19th, 1994, American troops staged a bloodless invasion of Haiti, a troubled, politically and socially troubled and economically very poor country in the Caribbean Sea region of Latin America, to restore the legitimate elected leader, deposed President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, to power. On September the 28th, 1994, the car ferry MS Estonia, which was sailing from Estonia's capital Tallinn to Sweden's capital Stockholm, capsized in a heavy autumn storm and sank, killing a total of 852 people, most of whose bodies have never been recovered. This was one of the worst peacetime shipping disasters. On the same day in Mexico, Latin America, Mr. Jose Francisco Ruiz Massieu, a Mexican politician, another official of the then ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party, was assassinated on orders of Mr. Raúl Salinas de Gortari. I believe the brother of, of then Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari, whose term ended on December the 1st, 1994. On October the 1st, 1994, in Slovakia, Eastern Europe, populist leader Mr. Vladimir Mečiar won the parliamentary elections. Palau, a country in Oceania, southern Pacific Ocean, gained independence, or well, close to the south anyway, independence from the United Nations Trusteeship Council. On October the 4th, 1994, in Switzerland, Central Europe, 23 members of the Order of the Solar Temple cult were found dead, a day after 25 of their fellow cultists were similarly discovered in Morin Heights, Quebec, Eastern Canada. On October the 15th, 1994, after 3 years of US exile, Haiti's President Aristide returned to his country. On November the 5th, 1994, former US President Ronald Reagan, who had left office after serving for 8 years as US President in January 1989, announced in his probably last coherent piece of writing in a handwritten letter to the American people that he had Alzheimer's disease. He would eventually pass away in quiet retirement in June 2004, aged 93. He has been outlived among the 44 US presidents only by 3 US presidents. Gerald Ford, who lived 1 month longer, George Bush, or George Bush Sr., who lived to be 94, and then Jimmy Carter, who is still alive and, God willing, will turn 95 on October the 1st, 2019. On November the 8th, 1994, as a part of the so-called Republican Revolution, this right-wing political party won a majority of the US House of Representatives seats, a majority of the available Senate seats, enough to clinch also a Senate majority effective in January 1995. Also, it won a majority of the available governorships. This was caused by the widespread feeling among the American people that the US President Bill Clinton, a Democrat, was too inexperienced and indecisive to be an effective leader of the country. But as we know, he was able to turn the Republican Party's radical wing's influence into a disproportionate media blitz during 1995, and he fairly easily was re-elected in November 1996. And despite the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which led to his impeachment by the US House of Representatives, he was able to serve 2 full terms as US president, although, of course, his moral authority was all but destroyed by the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Newt Gingrich would serve as the US House of Representatives Speaker from January 1995 until November 1998. And yes, I forgot to add that on October the 16th, 1994, in my distant, in the country where I'm now speaking, in Finland, Northern Europe, I think 56.9% of the voters casting valid votes voted to join the European Union, effective on January the 1st, 1995. In the western neighboring country of Finland, Sweden, on November the 13th, a narrow majority of voters decided to join the European Union, while in Sweden's western neighbor and Finland's northern neighbor, Norway, a fairly narrow majority voted not to join the European Union. Also, a fairly narrow majority had voted, or not that big majority had voted back in 1972 not to join the European Economic Community, even though Norway's southern neighbor Denmark ended up joining it. Yes, on November the 28th, the Norwegian EU referendum was held. On December the 1st, 1994, Ernesto Zedillo of the ruling center-left Institutional Revolutionary Party took office as the Mexican president. On December the 2nd, the Australian federal government agreed to pay reparations to Indigenous or Native Australians who were displaced during the nuclear tests at Maralinga in the 1950s and 1960s. On December the 11th, 1994, the Russian president, Mr. Boris Yeltsin, ordered troops into Chechnya in the Caucasus region. On December the 19th, 1994, a planned exchange rate correction of the Mexican peso to the US dollar became a massive financial meltdown in Mexico, unleashing the tequila effect on global financial markets, which prompted a $50 billion bailout by the Clinton administration. Civil unions between same-sex couples were on the same day legalized in Sweden. On December the 31st, the date was skipped by the Phoenix Islands to switch from the UTC or Greenwich Mean Time -11 time zone to UTC or Greenwich Mean Time +13, and by the Line Islands to switch from Greenwich Mean Time -10 to Greenwich Mean Time +14. The latter became the earliest time zone in the world, 1 full day ahead of Hawaii.